Hello and welcome to the I Hit Drums podcast with me, Mark, your teacher for this series. In today's episode, we're going to start tackling something that all drummers need to face at some point, and that is triplets. Triplets are a really good way of adding some interesting kind of flavour to your fills and to some of your grooves, but they can be slightly harder to get your head around when you first start working with them. When you first start working with quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, these are all kind of doubles of the previous one. So when you first start working with quarter notes, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And eighth notes, you're essentially doubling the amount of hits. So the spaces between 1, 2, 3, 4, we add those ands, 1 and 2 and then the same again for 16th notes. We're just doubling the eighth note count. So all those gaps between the eighth notes, we're adding another note. And the reason that triplets can be quite tricky at first is because they kind of live in between the eighth note and the 16th note. And the triplets are actually eighth note triplets. And this is where it can get a little bit confusing. On page 61 of the book that we're working through, Intermediate 1, which you can find on my website www.ihitdrums.co.uk, you'll see a quarter note equals 2 eighth notes. Now this you should be familiar with by now. As I was saying earlier, the quarter notes, we just count 1, 2, whereas the eighth notes, those extra and counts live in between 1 and 2 and. So 2 eighth notes last the same amount of time as 1 quarter note. The second image on this page, we have eighth note triplets. And when these 3 eighth notes are grouped together to form the triplet, they also take up the same amount of space as a quarter note. And this means that the length of an eighth note when it's within an eighth note triplet is actually less than a normal eighth note. And that's very confusing. One of the best ways I found to actually explain this to my pupils is with a visual which you can find on page 62. And this is with pizza. The first image of a pizza represents the quarter note equaling 2 eighth notes. That's like taking a quarter slice of a pizza and chopping that quarter in half. So you got 2 smaller pieces within that quarter. Make sense? The second image, we've got the same quarter of that pizza, but now that quarter is chopped into 3 slices instead of 2. So you can clearly see that those 3 slices of pizza are slightly smaller slices than when that quarter is only cut into 2 slices. We're always dealing with the same quarter, we've just kind of chopped it up slightly differently. Now the bottom image is trying to display what would happen if the eighth note length was the same for standard eighth notes as it is within eighth note triplets. Because what you actually have here is 3 slices of pizza that are too big. They don't fit in that quarter anymore because there's too much of it. And that's really not possible. Now, I will add this page into the show notes just to give you a bit more of a visual on what I was going over there, because it is very confusing when you're first starting. Hopefully I've explained that to some level of clarity. So let's move on to page 63 and let's try our first exercise. Now, it's important that when you're playing triplets, you learn how to count triplets. So whereas we counted standard eighth notes as 1 and 2 and we counted 16th notes as 1 E and 2 E and you're going to count eighth note triplets as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And it's very important that there's no gaps or hesitations within this count. It should be a nice, flowing, smooth, regular count. So you don't want to go 1 and 2 and 3 and because what you're actually doing there, that space that you're leaving, you're actually turning that into a count of 16th notes. 1 and 2 and so that's not what we want. That's actually 1 E and 2. That's 16th notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So with that in mind, let's try the first example in exercise 6.1. We're just going to do single sticking, so right, left, all the way through, but we're going to be on the snare drum playing eighth note triplets. Let's give this a try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So you might not have been sure what to expect there. So now you've heard it, let's give it another try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I would recommend that you try the next two examples in this exercise. The second one has a bass drum on the quarter note, and the third example has alternate feet on the quarter notes. This is not only going to help your coordination, but that quarter note pulse should be matching up with whatever metronome click you're playing to. And that's going to give you some stability, and it's going to help you judge how much space you have for each of those triplets within each quarter note. And I'd recommend you spend some time just doing this. Triplets don't come as easily as some of the other note values, so getting very familiar with how they feel in relation to that quarter note pulse is very, very important. So once you feel comfortable with playing the triplets against that quarter note pulse, then you should be ready to move on to exercise 6.2. In this exercise, we're actually going to change rates. So we have done similar things to this before, using quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, and we're still going to use those note values, but now we're going to try change from those note values into the triplets. Now the key thing in this exercise is the bass drum on the quarter note pulse. Whatever speed you set your metronome to, the bass drum should always be landing with that metronome click. That's going to help you judge the space between all of these note values. If at any point your bass drum is not landing with the metronome, you've gone off. So really concentrate on getting that bass drum foot lining up with those metronome clicks. The first example isn't too bad because we're just doing quarter notes on the snare drum leading into those triplets. So in this example, you can actually count those eighth note triplets the entire time. So even though you're only playing 1, 2, 3, 4 in that first bar, you can still be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's going to help set you up for that second bar of triplets. So let's give that first example a try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The second example is a little bit trickier because you're moving from eighth notes into eighth note triplets. And the change between those two is very slight. It's not like we're going from eighth notes into 16th notes where it's a doubling. You're kind of somewhere in between the eighth notes and the 16th notes. I sometimes describe this as it kind of gives you a feeling like you're tripping up a little bit. It kind of makes you feel a bit unsteady. Now, counting triplets in this first bar is not going to help you because you're playing eighth notes. So the counting for this one is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so quite a tricky one. Let's give it a try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Then for the third example in exercise 6.2, we're moving from 16th notes into 8th note triplets. So this time we're actually going to be slowing down because we're going from that higher note value rate to a slightly slower one. And again, counting triplets in the first bar won't help you because you're playing 16th notes. So the counting for this one is going to be 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and once again, make sure that your bass drum is falling on that quarter note metronome click. Let's give it a try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now, exercise 6.3, I think, is really the exercise that helps you judge correctly how fast these triplets need to be in relation to the other note values, because we have slowest to fastest rates. So we're going to move from quarter notes to eighth notes to eighth note triplets to 16th notes. So gradually increasing that rate each bar. Now this exercise might take a little bit of time to really get your head around, especially when it comes to those triplets. But if you spent some time working on exercise 6.1 and you've got a good feel for the triplets on their own in relation to that quarter note bass drum, you should be okay with this. But be prepared for it to take a little bit longer to get correct. So before we try it, the counting for this one is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. You ready? Let's give it a try. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so if you've managed to work through exercise 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, you should have all the tools you need to play 6.4. Now, this is a much longer exercise. This is a 12-bar exercise, moving between those different note value rates and maintaining that quarter note bass drum all the way through. Now, you could also try this alternating the feet between the bass drum and the hi-hat foot, or you could even just do quarter note on the hi-hat foot. Any of these options will help strengthen your coordination on the kit. Now, we're not going to run through this exercise here. If you want access to that, I'd recommend you get the book Intermediate 1, which you can find on my website, www.ihitdrums.co.uk. And you can find this book as a paperback or an ebook. Next time on the podcast, we're going to be focusing on triplets within fills and how the sticking within triplet fills matters a lot more than it does within a standard 8th note or 16th note fill. And this is because when you play triplets in single sticking, that leading hand switches. So we'll get into that next time, along with adding accents to triplet patterns. But until next time, enjoy!